I didn't expect to place this order whenever this whole process began, but as the process unfolded, the choice became more and more obvious. After months of comparisons, dealer emails, family debates, we placed the order. Here's exactly why and what it means for the weekends to come. So as a recap to this series, and maybe for those watching for the first time, this has been a process. We decided that we wanted a truck. Note the want, because as we will discuss, it wasn't necessarily a need, so to speak. We're a family of 5. We have 2 working vehicles already. And what does this mean for the family, and how did we come to this decision? I have 3 young ones, as I mentioned. You might even hear them in the background while this video is recording. That's just kind of the situation we got, and that's okay. We have 2 working vehicles as we speak. We have a Tesla Model Y and we have a Chrysler Pacifica minivan. The minivan was something that I thought I would never get before I had 3 children. But whenever we had our 3rd child, practicality and space and ease of use became the critical need. And feeling cool simply was no longer really part of the equation. And that's also okay. But as the kids have gotten older, as we've gotten into more things such as sports and weekend activities and the desire to go out and have more adventures, so to speak, as a family, we wanted something with a little more capability, a little more utility, the ability to haul things while also still being comfortable in the cab. And a truck just really became something that made sense for where we were at in our family's life. So when I began this truck journey, I immediately began looking at all the usual contenders, right? The usual half-ton trucks. I've owned an F-150 before. It was a 2016 F-150. It treated me relatively well, although there was some issues with the dealer, well, with the truck itself, with the power steering going out with my pregnant wife alone in the mountains driving. That was an issue. And that was probably 2 weeks into owning the truck. And then there was another issue with it losing power while driving on busy streets multiple times, and the dealers could never recreate it. And so it was never really solved. So other than that, it treated us relatively well, but we knew the form factor that we really liked and the utility that we really liked. So we decided to look at trucks again. I looked at all the usual suspects: Ford, Ram, Chevy, GMC, Toyota, and ultimately narrowed it down to Ram. I liked the way the Ram Rebel looks. I think the interior was the nicest of all of them, in my opinion. The Ram offers a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty on 2026 models. That was enticing. I drove one for a week in Colorado, which I documented a little bit in the first video in this series, and had a very good experience. It was very comfortable and performed well. I enjoyed the new powertrain, the new Hurricane engine. Hearing lots of good things about at least current state, the reliability of that powertrain. I know there's a lot of opinions out there on Ram reliability, but hey, it's actually performing okay right now. And then we started also considering the Cybertruck. Now, like I mentioned, we already drive a Tesla Model Y, so we have home charging set up. So to power the vehicle is quite economical. The house that I live in came with solar, so that helps reduce the actual cost to me in terms of powering the electric vehicle. So that infrastructure and that familiarity with driving an electric vehicle and charging and just all that comes with that, I was already used to that. So that part wasn't as scary. However, the design and differentness of the Cybertruck itself was something to contend with, and honestly, still will be. We test drove the Cybertruck for essentially a day. We got a day in the life with it. Everybody got a chance to experience it. My wife got to drive it. I drove it. We experienced it as passengers, going and getting coffee, going to the grocery store, just to get a vibe for what that would be like. While it is so different, it is also so different in a good way. Pros and cons to everything, right? the way that this thing drives is, in my opinion, so nice. It is so fun. It is quiet. It is smooth. The new technology and engineering in the way that it steers, there's four-wheel steering, was something that just made such a large vehicle drive smaller than it feels. And so we really appreciated that about the truck. Now, when I began to really break this down, what would reality from a cost perspective look like from a Cybertruck purchase and a Ram Rebel purchase? Now, I did a few things to really try to get as close to reality as I could in this current state. Number one, first, I actually started talking to dealers at different Ram dealers across the nation. And in one of my videos, I show how one of the dealers was willing to provide hard discounts. I think it was just shy of $14,000 off MSRP of a fresh factory order on something that was exactly the way I was speccing it. That was enticing. It really dropped the MSRP substantially, and for a purchase price out the door was something that was appealing to me and my wife. The Cybertruck, on the other hand, as you are likely aware, there's no haggling, which pros and cons there too, right? Maybe you find a dealer that gives you a deal, but also you got to deal with a dealer. Nobody really enjoys that. And the Tesla prices are the Tesla prices on a website. So because this is really apples and oranges in terms of a gas-powered vehicle and an electric-powered vehicle, I wanted to take it a step further. Look at the cost comparison at a 3-year, 5-year, and 7-year basis. Total cost of ownership, the best I could calculate. So one of the other videos in this series, I also broke down using ChatGPT and one of its agents to go out and calculate and find information for me. That 3, 5, and 7-year from a gasoline and electricity comparison, incorporating the typical wear and tear or maintenance type things you would have to do, oil changes and that kind of thing, and how that compares. And what we found and what I demonstrate in that video is at all of the 3, 5, and 7-year marks, the Cybertruck ultimately comes out cheaper, specifically due to the cost of gasoline. That added cost of gas just begins to compound over time to where it becomes more expensive to drive, even at that 3-year mark and beyond. At that point, the gap gets bigger and bigger. Now, if you were charging exclusively outside of the home, that math may change. But in my scenario, that math worked out in my favor. So that was probably one of the biggest decision points that pointed us to the Cybertruck. Yes, we already had all of the cool things we liked about it, but there was the higher sticker shock, as well as some of the oddities about it that still exist that we will talk about in a moment. But ultimately is a cheaper vehicle to run over time. And especially whenever we want to use this truck to go out and do things, have experiences, get out in nature, have some adventures. That means we're going to be driving more. Now, yes, multi-day trips, we will be charging at superchargers, but there will be plenty of day trips and things of that nature where we're charging at home and going out and having fun and coming back and charging at home again, which reduces the cost massively. And on the flip side, would have raised the gasoline cost even more than what was in my calculation. Now, how about the family input? Well, the kids all love the bed of the truck and how it has the mechanical tonneau cover. They mentioned how they wanted to sleep there, and we might actually try that one day. Of course, the screen in the back was something that they loved. I don't want it to be, a gimmick, but it is something that is just kind of a nice to have for spending time in the back. Now, my wife is certainly still getting used to it all. It is such a large vehicle, but she agreed that it drove smaller than it is or, feels from the outside. Once you get in it and drive it, due to that four-wheel steering, it feels smaller than it is, which is fantastic. But she's still getting used to it. The technology in the truck, from the screen that's just as good as an iPad, for example, in terms of the screen usability, the touch sensitivity, all of that is just fantastic. I'm heavily into music, and the sound system in the truck is just a dream. It's just a nice place to be from a tech forward perspective. Also, obviously, from an engineering perspective in a lot of ways. And to me, that is just something that is really neat. If I'm going to be buying something at such a high sticker price, I like the idea of purchasing something that is just the latest and greatest and pushing the boundaries in terms of technology and engineering, as opposed to purchasing something new that is based on, sorry to say, but an old technology. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a fantastic technology. I love gas-powered vehicles. I've owned a lot of them. It's just something in my mind. I'm a tech-forward individual, and it just spoke to me a little bit more to help push me over that edge. Ultimately, what tipped the decision in favor of the Cybertruck, it was long-term cost. In other words, gas prices versus my ability to charge at home and the cost differential over the course of a 3, 5, 7 and beyond year term. Other costs built into that, oil changes, different types of fluid changes you have to worry about on a gas truck versus the Cybertruck, that simply just does not exist. The way that it drives and the technology that you interact with, light years ahead in the Cybertruck when compared to the Ram. And lastly, just the general excitement the family has for one versus the other. One would get the job done, and the other would get the job done and just have everybody feeling ecstatic. So what were some early blockers that almost stopped us from making this decision? Well, number one, it was the price of the truck. Certainly, when you look at two prices on the screen, and one is roughly $15,000 cheaper than the other, the immediate thought is go to the cheaper one. But again, as just mentioned, looking at the total cost of ownership, that puts that into perspective. Understanding that there are unknowns associated with this vehicle. Things like social acceptance is something that I've had to think about with a young family. However, all the feedback I'm hearing from owners across the nation is that that is beginning to die down, thankfully. I live in a location where a Cybertruck is not an uncommon thing to see, so I think the novelty of it has died down quite a bit. Financing rates is another one. They have been quite high in recent times. There are some promos going on right now at 3.99% that I'm attempting to get. I have not got a VIN number yet, so I can't actually lock that in. So that is still currently an unknown. Whereas with the Ram, there was much more enticing rates available, and that was also something that potentially swayed it the other way. I will note that I did take into account the cost of financing in both vehicles in my prior calculations as well. So the order process with a Tesla, as probably most of you know, but maybe some of you don't, was incredibly simple, as if I was ordering a pair of shoes. I ordered the all-wheel drive trim. The Cybertruck is obviously an amazing piece of machinery, but simply just beyond what I would need. And in fact, this all-wheel drive version would be the fastest vehicle that I've ever owned in my life. So I think that is just fine. I did not opt for any other options on this vehicle. I kept the interior black. Everybody with young children know that black is probably the smarter choice than white. And I did not opt for the different or upgraded wheels and tires. I thought the ones that come with it standard looked pretty neat. And also they do get better mileage. And so that was a win for me. I went ahead and placed that order with the $250 non-refundable deposit, and the order has been confirmed. At the time of order, the estimated timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. Would you be surprised to hear that recording a video with 3 young kids running around the house is difficult to do? So I'll be posting updates along the way on how that timeline actually plays out and what that process looks like for anybody interested in a similar process. So here's the thing. I'm going into this eyes wide open. What I mean by that is it's possible that this still doesn't work out long term. There are a few unknowns that need to be answered that, depending on that answer, will have a great influence on the long term. Number one, insurance. Right now, I'm only getting rough estimate insurance quotes because I do not have a VIN number. My current insurance provider gave me a hard number, and it was quite high. However, in the past, I was told that nobody can match Tesla's insurance quotes for a Tesla. And I found that to be true with my Model Y. They were significantly higher on my Model Y than Tesla. And so right now I insure my van with my main insurance provider and the Tesla Model Y with Tesla alone because they were untouchable. So I'm hopeful Now with the Cybertruck, that is the same case. However, I still don't know that to be true, and Tesla will not quote me until I have a VIN number assigned. So once I get that information, I'll be posting that again in a video or a short, so please be subscribed so that you can hear the updates along the way. But with that honesty and that perspective going into this, I'm okay if that's the case. We are making honest, real decisions up to this point on what we want for this family. And as reality may or may not change in accordance with that, we will pivot and do what we need to do for what's best for the family as well. However, with that being said, I'm hopeful it all works out because I'm kind of excited. So what's next? I need to get an actual update on my delivery. I need to get a VIN number. I need to get insurance quotes, delivery day. Once delivery day comes, then the real tests begin. How does this perform from a livability perspective for a family of 5, 3 growing children, involved in lots of different things, using it on the daily as both a daily driver and an adventure mobile? Sounds fun, but at the same time, how does that actually work in reality? We will most likely be trading in the minivan. I know it's near and dear to our heart for sure, but we're most likely going to be trading that in towards the truck. And how is life without a third row, right? That's something that we genuinely think about and have debated between me and my wife. And not having that little extra buffer for the kids between themselves. I have 2 boys who love to not keep their hands to themselves, as well as the proximity to us in the front seat and the volume of everything going on behind us. So how's that going to work? We shall see. And then also some of the assumptions we've made in our cost analysis, primarily in terms of the cost to charge the truck, both at home and depending on how we utilize it out in the world with supercharging. Does that reality play out how we thought it would as well? And lastly, with trading in the minivan, that means we're going to have 2 electric vehicles. We will no longer have a gas car. And honestly, that's something that I think about and I felt a little bit was like a safety blanket, 1 of each. In case something goes wrong and things can't charge, I can always get gas and vice versa. Now with 2 electric vehicles, sure, there's some benefit to talk about there, but it also makes me a little bit nervous. How is it with 1 charger at home and 2 electric vehicles used as the daily? How does that work out? We shall see. And then of course, we're going to be having some early, maybe things that I don't know if regret is the right word, but what are we missing from a standard gasoline powered vehicle? And what are some things from the early stages that we absolutely love? I'm sure there's going to be things all along the spectrum, and I'm excited to get in and see what that actually is. And I promise I will share here. So if you're an individual or a family in a similar boat, hopefully this is helpful for you. And we're having fun making this and presenting this out into the world at the same time. Win-win. So a lot to come. We're really excited. Thanks for being here. This is Weekend Gold. Until next time.